Hi everyone, welcome to Vantage Live Analysis session. So I'll just wait for about 1 more minute for more people to join us before we get the session started. So for today, we will be doing a live analysis session. So if you guys have any requests as well, please do put your questions under the questions tab. Right, so I have both the chat box as well as the Q&A box open. Okay, so I'll just give it about 1 more minute before we get the session started. At the same time, right, for those of you guys who just joined us, if you guys have any questions or any chat requests, if there are any specific currencies that you're looking at, please put your please put your chat requests under the tab, right, and we will take a look at them together. Okay, so let's get the session started. Right, so for today, we will be doing the live analysis session. It's a 30-minute session, right? So this is just a brief introduction of myself, right? So I'm Lee Sing, and you can also find me on LinkedIn, right? So if you guys have any questions with regards to the recordings that were done on Wednesdays, Thursdays, or Fridays, right? You can find them on Vantage YouTube page. So if you have questions on that, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you're currently with us live right now, please put your questions under the questions tab. So just a quick disclaimer before we get started, the information presented here is not to be treated as investment advice. It's for educational purposes only. So this is the agenda that we will be covering for today. So first we will hop on to the economic calendar for the key economic events for this week. Right. So yesterday we saw the release of dollar CPI data, right? I mean US CPI data. And alongside other high impact news events. So we will take a look at that and also the upcoming ones for today. And then we will also be taking a look at the setups that were made on Wednesdays, right? So how did that turn out and if there were any triggers, right? Or any trades taken. And we will also take a look at the current setups and what we are looking out for the coming week. At the same time, right, throughout the session, it's open for Q&A as well. So if you guys have any requests or any questions, please do put your questions under the questions tab. Okay, so let me just open up the economic calendar for a start, right? So for economic calendar, usually I'll just use Vantage economic calendar or Forex Factory economic calendar, right? So either one. So in this case, right, let me just bring up the tab. Okay, so this is the economic calendar for this week. Usually, in this case, I'll just filter according to the currencies, right? So if there are specific currencies that you're interested in, right, then yeah, you can take a look at that. If not, right, yeah, you can see that these are basically the high impact news events. So they're usually categorized either in red or orange, right? So the high and medium impact events. So you can see that for yesterday, the key event would revolve or the attention focuses mainly on dollars data, right? So dollar CPI data, because this would provide more insight as to whether the Fed's what is the Fed rate hike path like going forward. So dollar index itself, the dollar CPI data actually did the CPI actually did lesser than or rather in line with expectations. So annual CPI for December stood at 6.5%. It's in line with market expectations. But if you compare it to the previous reading, right, that actually eased slightly, right, down from 7.1% in the previous month. So with inflation easing, this could also mean that there is no pressure for Fed to be extremely hawkish, right? Because right now inflation that's already easing. So in this case, right, markets are also betting Fed to ease their tightening cycle, right? Essentially tone down on the pace of its rate hikes. So this would then put a bearish impact on the dollar. So if you take a look at dollar in general, right, we will take a look at dollar index later, but the idea is that dollar has been on a downtrend. So if you take a look at Aussie dollar, Euro dollar, or any others, right, there are dollar denominated pairs. Essentially, because of the dollar's weakness, they just keep climbing higher. So this one's also partly attributed to the inflation data, which has been easing, and markets are also anticipating a smaller rate hike going forward, right? So it's down to about 25 basis point in its next meeting instead of the 50 basis point that we saw in December's hike. So the upcoming one would be more on the consumer data, right? So the consumer data tonight. And then also you can see that in terms of the unemployment claims did as well. So the labor market is still relatively tight. So in this case, right, basically when inflation ease this itself, right, with expectations of a less hawkish Fed, it can put more downside pressure on the dollar. So this is on the economic calendar, right? So next we will be taking a look at the setups, right? So on dollar index, pound dollar, as well as Aussie dollar. Okay, so let me just bring up the chart, right? So for the chart, let's take a look at dollar index for a start, right? So just bring this up. Okay, so on dollar index first. So dollar index we saw on the monthly time frame, right? So on the higher time frame, let's take a look at the higher time frame, and I'll remove this indicators. So on the higher time frame, you can see that on dollar index, it's still testing the monthly support region. And if you take a look at where we are on the left, right? So this is the current price that it's sitting on, trading at around 102. And on this area, if you take a look at the left, you can see that this was a previous resistance turn support level. There's also the 50% retracement in line with this. So this is on the monthly picture. If you take a look at the weekly, you can see that in the previous move, right, on the daily time frame is still showing bearish move down, right? And price came near this resistance zone, and we saw this push below, right? I believe we were somewhere here on Wednesday. So back when we took a look at the analysis on Wednesday, you can see that price actually tested this resistance level, right? It was the previous support term resistance level you can see here as well. And then following the dollar's data, right, just continue much lower. So even if you take a look at just market structure in general, right, especially on the daily or the 4 hours, even though we are in a potential monthly demand area, but what we're seeing over here is that there's still lower lows and lower highs being formed. Just mark out the highs and lows. You can see that even in the last move, right, price broke below. And then right now, this is the whole leg that we are within over here, right? So we'll probably see some consolidation if this demand area is to hold. If not, we could see further downside here, right? So this is on dollar index. If you take a look at Aussie dollar and pound dollar, both of them actually pushed up much higher, right? Because of the dollar's weakness. So on Aussie dollar, on the higher time frame first, right? On, I believe, the monthly time frame, you can see that this was the previous candle, right, where we highlighted this resistance zone, and also the candle that held within the wake of its previous candle. So price pushed up to this area. When we are on the daily time frame, you can still see bullish order flow, right? Again, how so? This can be in the forms of the highs and lows. You can see that prices are still forming higher highs and higher lows, and there is a sweep of the previous low over here. You can see that price came in, it swept below the low, right? So it pushed slightly, right? And then following which prices continue much higher. And this area, which you can also consider as a manipulation, right? So when price came in, swept and broke structure, price then tested this area again as a support region. You can see price came in, tested as a support, and then following which it just continued forming your higher highs and higher lows. So in this case, right, this area itself, right, even though price pushed into this zone, right, when we are on the 4 hours, right, this is the last analysis. So essentially, we saw that price came in and tested the resistance area. So price broke structure here, right, and the price broke above the resistance area, and then retested as a support region. And then we're seeing price testing this resistance area over here. So this was the call, right? So essentially waiting for a break and close below the downside. So once price tests this region, right, we're waiting for price to break below the support area, right? Because if price doesn't break below the support area, it would continue higher, which is basically this case, right? Even though it's also triggered by the dollar's weakness and news releases. So you can see in this case, right, this downside confirmation didn't happen. So essentially what we're waiting for is a break and close below so that we can take a retest of it as a resistance, play to the next drop, which is this low here, right? So you can see in this example, right, this confirmation or the trigger didn't happen. Prices continue much higher, right? So even though it tested this resistance slightly for a while, but following which is that you can see that the break to the downside didn't happen. So essentially there's no trigger here. So this is on Aussie dollar, and let's see where we are right now. So there isn't anything too different, right, from what we did earlier. So let me just remove all of this, right, and let's start a fresh analysis. So if you're on the monthly time frame, it's still the same region, right? So this is still the monthly resistance area. same candle that we have over here, you can see that this is basically the candle that's still held within before price pushed much lower, and also it's confirmed by this bearish candle following which. That's one. And even if you take a look at just the horizontal levels, you can see that this was a previous support level, and then price came in, tested the support level twice and became a resistance, right? So this is one. So prices are still sitting in a resistance area, but as far as we are on the daily time frame, you can see that it's still showing bullish market structure. Prices are still forming higher lows and higher highs coming into this region, right? Even if you're on the 4 hours time frame, it's pretty much the same thing, right? So if you take a look at the smaller time frame on the 4 hours, you can see that there's still higher lows and higher highs. This is last high. It's being formed, and price broke above the structure over here. So any pullback within this leg itself is still bullish. So again, if you're on the 4 hours time frame, right, the most recent demand area that we have over here would be this region, essentially this area over here. So this is the demand, right? I want to highlight this in a different color, probably in gray, right? So this is the demand area. So if price pulls back into this zone, it could form a new low, right? Then depending on where it's the resistance area it comes into, if price fails to break above this region, right, and then you're seeing a change in structure on the smaller time frame, it shows us that this support area is weak and hence is targeted, and we can use it to play shots, right? So a break below this area can give us confirmation for a further push down. If not, you can see that this monthly resistance itself, right, between this monthly resistance, there's basically this huge range, right? We're talking about from 0.71 to 0.68. So this is a good 300 pips, right? Or 250 pips. So basically, right, from this area, right, this is a good 250 pips range, right? So price could just continue much higher, which is why as much as possible, we want to try and find smaller time frame confirmation before taking any positions. So this is on the 4 hours time frame. If you're on the 30 minutes time frame, you see pretty much the same thing, right? So this is the demand area. If you're on the 30 minutes, you can see that there's a very clear resistance and support area as well. If I had to just bring this line across, you can see that this area was tested as a resistance 2 times, right? And price broke above it. So if it comes into this region again, this is one area that we can consider. Right, so back on the 1 hour, you can see this clearer as well. So another thing that you want to check, right? So yesterday we did a session on Fibonacci retracement. The idea is that when price, right, having identified this demand areas, you want to see if there are any Fibonacci levels that line up here. So basically, right, what I want to do in using Fibonacci retracement, I'm trying to find impulsive movement, right, and then waiting for the pullback. So in this case, this is the last move that we have, right, and this is the potential pullback. If you want to be more precise, right, this is actually the low you can take it from. But in this example, because this is characterized just by one candle itself, right, and it's also partly triggered by news, I would consider taking this whole move instead, right, because it doesn't make sense to take it just based on one candle. So this is the low, this is the high, right? So you can take a Fibonacci retracement using this as the starting point and this as the ending point. So when you do that, you can see that Fibonacci retracement from low to high, right? This is the 61.8 retracement, which is taken over here, and it lines up with this demand area. So this is one region to consider, right? And then the other thing that we can check is our Fibonacci extensions. So Fibonacci extensions are basically zigzag patterns. What we're trying to do is to find a potential zigzag pattern and trying to use these 3 points essentially to project where price might end up here. So the idea is that if there is also a Fibonacci extension here, right, we can see some sort of Fibonacci confluence going on, right, and it's also in line with a demand area. So if you're not too familiar with Fibonacci extension, right, not to worry. In our next session, we will be covering in more details on Fibonacci extension, right? So that's for next Thursday session, right? So if you want to find out more about Fibonacci extension, please do sign up for that session. So in this case, right, so Fibonacci extension, these are the 3 points, point 1, point 2, and point 3 to project the area. So you can again take the Fibonacci extension, point 1, point 2, point 3. So you can see, right, 100% extension lines up within this zone as well. So we have for 61.8 retracement and 100% extension. I'll put this in a different color. So this demand area here. So this is on Aussie dollar. For me, at least on the 1 hour time frame, it's still bullish, right? You're seeing that prices are still forming a higher lows and higher highs, even though it's within the monthly resistance area. So we will probably have to wait for price to play out or pan out a bit more, right, before we get confirmation for shorts. So if there is any, right, if not, this monthly resistance could not hold and price could just continue higher. So let's take a look at how we are, how it's going to go. But as far as where we are right now, you can see that even on the 1 hour picture, right, there's still a support ascending trend line going on here on a 1 hour, right? So until price breaks below this demand area, for me, at least on the 1 hour picture, is still bullish, right? So this is the picture here, right? So even though it's sitting on a monthly resistance, we need to wait for a higher time frame or further structure to confirm that this is indeed a low, right? That is weak and targeted for us to play the shorts. If not, right, price could just continue much higher, given that right now, if you take a look at the structure, it's forming your higher highs and higher lows. If you put it in line chart, you can see this as well, right? Subsequent higher highs and higher lows being formed. Okay, so this is the picture on Aussie dollar. Right. If you guys have any questions or any chart that you want us to look at, right, do put them under the questions chat as well. Okay, so the next one that we will be taking a look at, it's on pound dollar, right? So let's take a look at pound dollar. Okay, so pound dollar, it's this area here. So essentially, again, on the higher time frame, if you take a look at the higher time frame, we can see that on the monthly picture, prices are sitting on a resistance turn support level. Support turn resistance level, right? So you saw how price tested as a support and then broke below, and right now it's coming back into this region again. If you put a horizontal line across, you can see pretty much the same thing, right? This horizontal line separates the chart very neatly in half. So this is the area, right? If you take a look at a weekly, nothing much on the weekly, but if you take a look at the daily, right? So on the daily, let me just put this back into candlesticks, right? So on the daily, you can see that there was a higher high and higher low being formed. And right now we're seeing this low, right? The last low that we have, right? So price broke below this area. We highlighted this, the last region, right? So this candle itself on the daily as a resistance area over here. Right, so this is the resistance area, and if you go on to the 4 hours, right, this was the downside confirmation level. So in this case, right, we're expecting price to basically break below. So if you extend this across, right, it was really more of this region, right? So again, not a specific level, right? So not a specific level, but rather a zone, right? So you can see if you extend it across, right, it's basically the resistance then support level that we have here. So again, right, how price tested as a resistance, and then you can see tested as a support, continued higher. So this is still the support area. You can see that the downside confirmation didn't take place over here. There isn't a break and close below this area. This is the supply region, right, on the daily time frame. So how we got this supply region is basically taking a look at the candle. You can see that this is the candle, this candle itself. So this is the candle we highlighted, essentially the candles that still held within the previous wick. So once demand fails, it creates supply, right? So price following which you can see that it broke below, tested, and then continued lower. So this is the candle that we have, right? So I just want to capture the range of this candle. I'll turn on the magnet mode to capture the highs and lows. So basically price came into this area, a wick above it, right? If you're on the 4 hours time frame, you can see that you're still, again, right, seeing pretty much the same thing, higher highs and higher lows. In the previous move, right, we highlighted, I believe, this to resistance area here. This to resistance area over here, right? So we saw how price reacted off this resistance zones, but you can see that coming into this region, which is why it's always useful to use your smaller time frame as confirmation. You can see coming into this region, right? So when price tested this area, the next thing that we want to do, right, when price comes into this area is again check for any confirmation, right, on the smaller time frame. So on Wednesday, right, 8 p.m. So it's somewhere here. So I believe where we saw the chart on Wednesday, it's at around this area. Yeah, so this was where we saw the chart on Wednesday, right? So we are seeing price test this demand area, and this is the resistance area again. So the idea is that if price comes into this region, are we taking immediate entries? No, we want to wait for a change in structure on the smaller time frame. So you can again see, right, the same thing. So when price comes into this area, right, coming to this region, price tapped it over here once. And then afterwards, it just pushed higher. This is the low, right? In this case, it's triggered more by news events, right? So not so much over here, right? So you can see that price came in, tap over here, we saw a sharp rejection, and it just broke this area, continued much higher. Okay, so this is on pound dollar, right? Let's just go back further onto the 4 hours. So let's see where we are right now. Okay, so again, right, it's still on the higher time frames resistance that didn't change, right? So I'll just remove all this. For me, the next level to consider, right? So if you're on the 4 hours or even on the daily time frame, this is the region, right? So essentially this area over here, you can see that there is also a huge gap over here, right? So this area essentially between 2 wicks. So this huge gap over here, right? So another way people can see this is basically imbalance, right? Essentially there is a lack of buyers and sellers balancing it, right? At this area, there's just strong selling pressure, right? Which some of the orders might not have been filled along the way down. So when price comes into this area again, the remaining sell orders might have been triggered. So that's something to consider. But as always, right, this is the picture on the bigger time frame. So I want to use the smaller time frame, right? Either down to the 4 hours or 1 hour for more confirmation. So in this case, you can see that price came into this area. There isn't anything on the 4 hours, right? So currently it's just this area here, and again, higher lows, higher highs being formed, right? And then we can see that price did sweep the low of this area, right? So price came in, and essentially you can see that price broke structure. So that's one that caused the break in structure. And what's also interesting to note is that the low of the previous move, right, actually swept the previous low. So in this case, right, this would be the new demand area. So you can see that you can either take the whole wick or the candle. So this is the new demand area on the 4 hours time frame. So if I'm on the 15 minutes, right, if you go down to this region, you can see that in terms of the 4 hours demand, right, if you want to zoom down further, right, down onto the 15 minutes or even the 30 minutes, right? So if you want to go much further, 15 minutes, 30 minutes demand area, you can see here, over here, right, within this zone. So essentially when price enters into this area, you can see that when price enters into this region, price could come into a smaller time frame demand area over here, right? So essentially then it forms a new structure. So if demand starts holding, then this structure essentially tells us that this high itself fails to put in a new low, right? And then we could see upside from here. So that's how I use it to determine whether this area is going to hold, right? Of course, it's all based on probability. There's always a chance that there's a change in structure, but it turns out to be inducement, right? Or liquidity sweep before it continues to the downside. That's possible as well, right? But the idea is just putting in a higher probability for us. So this is the picture on pound dollar, right? And then I believe those are the setups, right? And the last setup that I want to show you guys, right, would be taking a look at gold. So let's see where gold is right now, right? And also, you know, if there's any key levels that we have going forward. If you guys have any other questions as well, do put them under the questions chat. Okay, so let's take a look at gold. Right, so on gold on the monthly time frame, it broke the monthly resistance. You can see this was the previous monthly supply region, right? So this was the supply region I've been looking at over here, right? You can see that this was the candle that held within, and this for me was the supply. But you can see that there isn't any reversal on your smaller time frame, right? So if you're on the daily, you're on the 4 hours, you can see that prices are in some sort of ascending channel. That's one. Right, you can see that it's in an ascending channel over here, right? Testing this zone very nicely. In terms of market structure, it's forming your higher lows, higher highs, and right now it even broke through this area, right? So essentially, this is the monthly resistance that I was waiting for. But in this example, you can see that price did not actually show a change in structure, even if you're on the smaller time frame, right? You can see every resistance level is just being broken, right? Your higher highs, higher lows, and then prices continued to the upside. It even broke this resistance then support level, right? So price broke above it. When resistance fails, you can see that it becomes a support level, right? So this is a classic example of the resistance turn support level, right? And seeing how it turns out on gold. So this area here, and then prices continue much higher. It even broke this ascending channels resistance. So right now on the monthly time frame, at least, right, there isn't this level. It's not valid anymore. Right, if you take a look at it on the weekly picture, you can see that just this area alone, right, this is the next area of consolidation. So how so? You can see that there is some kind of range that prices are in, kind of moving sideways before we saw that break. So right now we're seeing a move into this area as well. If you take a look at it in the line chart, you can see that this area here, right, essentially there's some sort of consolidation before we saw that break below. So this is another area that I'm waiting for price to push into, right? So this is on the weekly time frame. Again, right, you can see that coming into this demand area, I'm in the supply region here, prices are showing very strong bullish order flow, right, with higher lows and higher highs being formed. What this also suggests is that if we are going to see any reversal, right, if this area is going to hold, we need to first again see the change in structure on the smaller time frame. Right now, you can see still bullish order flow coming in, right? You can see very clear higher highs and higher lows being formed. And if to take a look at the previous example, right, so the previous monthly picture. So again, the previous monthly resistance area was here, this region. Right? So this was the previous monthly resistance. Let me just extend this across. You can see that it's the same idea, right? So coming into this region, you can see the bullish momentum is still very strong. and there isn't a change in structure over here, right? So still bullish, higher highs and higher lows. So we want to see if there is actually a change in terms of market structure coming into this area, right? If not, price could just continue further up. So that's just something to watch, right? And in this area itself, so if you were to take it based on the specific candle, right, I would consider the whole high here. I'll take it based on this candle. So essentially this area, this candle here. Okay, so this is depending on, this is just giving yourself a range to work with, essentially this area. So I identify them based on candles. So which is why I'll highlight this area. So this is the picture on the weekly time frame. Okay. Okay, what is the H1 short-term retrace back to? Let's take a look at the H1, right? So this is on the 4 hours. You can see this 4 hours over here, right? If you take a look at the daily first, right? So on the daily, there isn't anything. We have a clear resistance level. So take a look at it in the past, right? There's a resistance level over here. Resistance then support level. This is on the daily. If you take a look at it in line chart, you can see as well, right? This was the previous area where we saw the test of a resistance multiple times, right? So this is the first level in terms of the support. In fact, we already saw a break and close above this, right? This small tiny reaction here, price breaking and closing above it, and it's continuing on the upside. So this is on the daily picture. If you take a look at the 4 hours, you can see this area as well. So that was the break and close that I was talking about, right? So this area here, essentially, price breaking tested this region, right? And then you see it holding as a support and it continued to the upside. So this, for me, it's a demand area, right? And if you take a look at how prices were like here, sorry for that, right? So if you take a look at how prices are like over here, right? If you're on the 1 hour time frame, you can see price essentially tested, right? And along this zone itself, right? Previously, there was also consolidation area. So if you expand this area, you can see that this actually tested as a demand zone here. The price came in, tested this region as a demand area. And so price came in, tested this region as a demand area. And also there is a sweep of the previous low, right? So there was a demand here. You can see that the first time price actually came in and pushed higher was actually here. And then it pushed higher, it broke the last high. And then coming in, right, it came in again, tapping into the demand area. And more interestingly, it's that it broke, or rather it swept the previous low. So if you take a look at the previous structure, you can see that price actually came in. So let me just lighten this color, right? So it actually swept the last low that we have, right? So the low over here. So there is a liquidity sweep, right? So then this serves as a demand area. Right, so when price sweeps this low, essentially what it's doing is that if there are people who are taking long positions in, right, they could put their stop loss just slightly below this low over here, right? Since there is a break in structure, there is a break in the last high, right? So they put their stop loss below this area. So there's a sweep that went just slightly below the previous low, right? Before price continue on the upside. When there is this sweep, right? This candle itself then serves as a demand area. So this is the demand zone. You can see that price came in, right? So following the sweep over here, the sweep of the previous low, price broke above and came in tap as a demand. And right now it's just pushing higher. So this for me on the H1, this is the last demand area, right? So this demand area is still hold unless it's being broken. So this is the range, right? So this starts at around 1874.50, right? This region here. Okay, so this is the last demand area that we have over here. So again, when price comes into this area, you want to consider the smaller time frame, as long as it's not triggered by news events, right? In this case, it'll be hard to catch this move if you are going to stay away from trading key data or key data releases, right? If not, right, when price comes into this area, same thing, right? Wait for a change in structure on the smaller time frame to see if this demand area is going to hold. So that's one, right? So right now we're seeing seeing prices push higher on the H1. There isn't any area for me, right? At least not from a graphical level. There isn't any support level here, right? So this is the demand area for me. Another thing you can also check is to see if there are any Fibonacci retracements that line up there. So for Fibonacci retracement, you can see this is the push up. And if we do see any reversal, right? So you can take a Fibonacci retracement starting from the low here and ending at a high here. So when we do that, right, taking a Fibonacci retracement of this move from low to high, open up these key levels, right? So again, you can see in this example, I'll just put this in a different color, let's say in black. Okay, for some reason, I'm not able to show the levels, interestingly. Right. Okay, put this as because of this. Okay, so yeah, the 38.2%, right? So in this case, you can see a 38.2%. It's taken from this low, the impulsive move, right? And if we do see a reversal, of course, along the way, if prices continue making a new high, you might have to adjust the highest point accordingly, right? So 38.2%, it's over here. And then in terms of Fibonacci extensions, again, there's zigzag pattern. You can see this is the zigzag pattern. If we do see a reversal here, and these are the 3 points that we will be taking to project the extension. So when you do that, you can see that this is the extension level, 0.1. 0.2 and 0.3. So if I were to open up these key levels, right, we have these 3 levels that are commonly used, right? You can see in this example, specifically the 78.6 extension, which I'll put it in a different color, let's say in pink, right? So the 78.6 extension actually coincides with the retracement level here. This is the area. So this is one zone to watch. Okay, so this is the H1 for me, right? So this is the demand area, right? And that's the higher time frames resistance. So again, right, if you take a look at market structure, just seeing how price is like, right? There is a break of the last high, right? So if we do see a pullback into this area, this was one demand area for me to watch, which is at around the 1870.50 level. Sorry, 1875.50 level. Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Chong. Okay, so I believe that it's all the questions that we have, right? So we went through a few setups actually on dollar index, Aussie dollar, as well as on gold, right? So those are the setups we will be taking a look at. Right, so let me just include gold as well. Right, so those are the setups we'll be reviewing for next week. Okay, so if you guys have any other questions, right, feel free to put them under the questions tab. If not, right, that's what we have for today's session. If you guys want to check out the previous recordings, you can go to vantagemarkets.com/webinars. Over there, we have the previous sessions, right? All of them are being recorded. It's on Vantage Markets YouTube. You can also reach out to support at Vantage Markets for anything account related, right? Or even, funding of accounts and things like that. So just feel free to reach out to support at vantagemarkets.com. So crazily, it just rejects from 1907. So what is your take? So let's take a look at gold, right? So yeah, gold has been on a very strong uptrend. It's breaking past every single resistance area, even on the monthly, right? So this was surprising, but even when it enters into the monthly area, you can see that on the 4 hours, 1 hour, there wasn't any change in the structure itself, right? Just continued much, much higher. And so every demand area, right, or support region is not being broken. So for me, right, it just rejects, okay, 15 minutes, hang on, 1907, 1907 is here. So again, if you're to take a look at it, right, just in terms of where we are based off the higher time frames. So it was first, right? So 1907 is here, right? It can be based on this area. You can see this is the candle, right? So this region over here. So again, the candle that still held within the previous week. So this might be a potential resistance area here. So this is the region, right? So this is currently the picture on the 4 hours. If you're on the 15 minutes time frame, so price essentially pushed into this area, right? This is the last low that we have over here, right? So there isn't any, price development going on yet. Not in this region, right? So price essentially pushed into this area. If you want to, right, you can take a look at how price it's like, right? So we might have to go a lot further. In this case, I'm not sure if there's enough data, but we probably wouldn't have, enough data for that. Let me just try and scroll all the way back. Yeah, we probably don't have enough data for this. Okay, let's see. So we do have this area. So you can see that even in the previous move, right, there's some kind of consolidation going on over here, right, which is the M15 candle. So this was the area, right? And essentially, we had price come into this region, the one time over here. And then right now price also, I believe, let's see if it actually swept the previous high. So it's at 1909, right? So probably slightly lower. I believe right now prices are not at that area yet, right? But on the 4 hours, it's sitting on the supply on the shorter term time frame. But right now where we are, right, on the 15 minutes, there isn't anything over here, right? So you have at least what we have on the 15 minutes is this region. So if you take a look at just the highs and lows, you can see that again, it's still forming a higher highs, right? This is the break of the last high, and then price pushed up much higher. So anywhere within this leg itself, right, price could still react to the demand for a pullback. So for me, on the 15 minutes time frame, if you take a look at demand supply area, for me, this was the extreme area over here, right? This is still a demand region. So if price comes into this region, right, this is an area I want to watch. Right now on the pullback, right, anything could happen here. But if you're on the, for the 4 hours time frame, it's sitting on a 4 hour supply, right? And right now, right, on the M15. Okay, I have another question. Yeah, so on the M15, these are the areas I watch for, right? TR, right? So these are the areas that I watch for. You can see this would be the demand area, and this is the supply region here. Right now, there isn't any setups, right? If you're to take a look at purely off the 15 minutes, I'm waiting for a low to be formed, right? And then structure to be formed to tell me where is a potential target. Right now, there is no target, right? If you're to take a pullback into this area, this is one region to watch. So this area here, the previous resistance and support level, right? So this is one area to watch, and the next demand area would be this area here. Essentially, the candle that swept past the previous low. You can see, right? So price came in, you have equal lows, right? Which could form potential areas of inducement, right? Essentially enticing traders to enter, right? For people who are trading off support resistance level, price came in, swept this low, and just continued higher, which is why this for me is a demand area to watch, right? If price comes into this region, if you want to go down to the smaller time frame, you can see that even within this area itself, right, there is this how candles are reacting over here, right? So there's supply, there's demand, right? So even within the 5 minutes, if you were to play any pullback, right, this is the 5 minutes demand area. So this is the 5 minutes demand. I'll just put this in a different color, right? Maybe in purple. But the idea is that this is still the 5 minutes demand area. So if we were to play a slight pullback, you still have to wait for a break and close below this demand area here. Okay, so yeah, I hope that answers your question. But if you're on the 5 minutes, right, these are the key zones that I'm looking at right now, right? So if you want to play a short-term move, right, a break below this area, a test of it as a resistance, we could play a short-term drop, right, protecting the profits here as one, and the second one is here. Okay, so I have another question, right? So do you consider fundamentals when entering trade, or is this strictly technical analysis, right? It's strictly technical analysis. Fundamental, it's useful when I'm thinking whether I want to take a position, right? So what I mean by that is that if there are key news releases around the corner, right, that's when I stay away from taking trades, especially because in that case, right, it's not it won't be followed by price actions triggered mainly by news releases, right? So in such cases, it can be hard to anticipate when price enters into this region, right? If you're waiting for a smaller time frame confirmation, it wouldn't happen in such huge spikes, right? So the exchange time between this, buy and sell, right, it's extremely fast. So in such cases, based on technical analysis, right, you can take the higher time frame, but if you want to use the smaller time frame for confirmation, it will be tough at major news releases, right? And on smaller time frames, usually stop losses will be tighter. So which is why you can be spiked out easily. So yeah, to answer your questions, right, it will be mainly based on technical. Okay, so beside the key of long wick and good time frame candles, what are the other factors you consider for understanding rejection from supply area? So understanding rejection from supply area, if you're on the smaller time frame, right, aside from just rejection, you can also, so let me just use the same example, right, on the 5 minutes time frame. Another way you can consider rejection from supply. So let's say we are on the 4 hours time frame, and this is the 4 hour supply, right? We saw how this was the 4 hour supply because of the candle's reaction. Essentially, the candle held within the wick of its previous candle. So this is a 4 hour supply. Within the 4 hour supply, you can see that demand zones are starting to build up as well. So what would be interesting to note is that when price comes into this region, right, when price comes into this area, you can see that this is the demand because price held within the wick and then it broke above, right? So for me, this is the demand region. What's interesting to note is that when price comes into this area, I want an acknowledgement of the demand, right? So ideally something like this, right? So price acknowledging the demand and failing. What this tells me is that this demand area, we saw a reaction at price, but it's not enough to push price higher. So what this shows is that there could be a lack of buying pressure, right? And then it's in line with the higher time frame. So this is another thing that you can watch for, essentially waiting for demand. When price enters a supply region on the higher time frame, waiting for demand areas within the smaller time frame to fail. Okay, so how would we check whether it's a demand, right? Because it could be possible that there is not enough there's not enough buyers over here, right? So essentially, if prices continues further to the downside, then for me, this is not an acknowledgement of the zone. But what I want to see ideally is that price comes in, right? And there are some buyers that are coming in over here, but it's not enough to push price higher. In this case, it tells me that the sellers overwhelmed the buyers, right? Potentially. And then in this case, it gives me confirmation from our downside. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Okay, so if you guys have any other questions, feel free to put them under the questions chat. If not, right, I'll just give it about maybe 1 more minute. Or if you have anything that you want to clarify, right, please put them under the chat as well. Okay, I have another question, right? Okay, thank you. I think now I understand about your point of rejection. Yes, yep, so I'm glad that helps. Yeah. Okay, please tell me if I got your name right. So I've been Chong or TR, is it? Okay, so yeah, I think if not, right, those are the questions, right? So if you guys have any other questions, feel free to put your response under the questions chat. Right, if not, I think that's the session that we have for today, right? So the key upcoming ones would revolve mainly around dollar. Right? And if you take a look at dollar, it's currently sitting on a key level. But again, right, in terms of rejection, right, just ensure that there is two things, right? So one would be the change in structure on the smaller time frame, right? So in terms of price coming down into, let's say, a demand area, it would still be on a downtrend on the smaller time frame, right? Forming lower lows and lower highs, right? So in order for price to respect a specific area, right, demand area, for example, we need to see the change in structure, right? So price breaking past a high that took out the previous low, right, or basically forming new higher lows and higher highs, then it tells us that it is reacting to higher time frames demand, right? So that's one. And if you're on the higher time frame, and in order to ensure that the higher time frame is going to hold, you would just want to check and ensure that this demand area, right, there's some kind of acknowledgement and failure of that region. Okay, so I hope that this session has been helpful, right? And as always, right, if you want to sign up for the session, just go to vantagemarkets.com/webinars. You can check out the speakers as well as the schedule there. Right, so I think with that, we have come to the end of the session, right? So thanks everyone for staying with us, right, till the end of the session. Have a great weekend, right? So enjoy the weekends and we will catch you guys again next week.